Go home. There's no room left. That was the cruel sentence my mother said to us, right in front of my 6-year-old son, when we came to attend the Christmas party 2 years ago at my grandmother's house. We left right after that, but my grandmother didn't let things pass so easily. She asked me to come back to the party, and what she did after that made my parents regret it. Follow my story. I'll tell you what happened next. Hello everyone. My name is Marcus. I'm 35 years old and currently the branch manager of a company specializing in car rentals and used car sales in Denver, Colorado. This isn't the job I dreamed of as a kid, but it gives me a stable income and the flexibility to care for my family. I live with my wife, Paisley, and our 8-year-old son, Logan, in a house in Thornton, a quiet suburb just 10 minutes from the office. Every morning, I wake up to Logan laughing in the room next door. He's always excited to tell me about his strange dreams. Paisley is usually busy in the kitchen making breakfast, sometimes reminding me not to forget my phone before I head out. These simple moments make me realize that true happiness doesn't have to be complicated. Still, there are nights when I wake up in a cold sweat, heart pounding, haunted by the memories of the Christmas party in 2023. Some nights, I sit straight up in bed, my shirt soaked, and I know deep down, I still haven't been able to let go of the images of my parents and my younger brother. My story begins on a weekend evening in December, just a few days before Christmas. Our family had just finished a cozy dinner that night, grilled meat and mashed potatoes, Logan's favorite. While Paisley was clearing the table and Logan was playing with his Legos in the living room, my phone suddenly rang. When I saw the name Grandma Helen light up on the screen, my heart instantly felt warmer. I picked up right away, because in my family, she's the only one who's ever truly loved me. My grandmother, Helen, is 78 years old, but still healthy and sharp. She was the only one in the family who ever stood up for me, especially when my parents constantly favored Charles, my younger brother. After asking a few kind questions about Logan, she got to the main reason for her call. She told me this year's Christmas would be held at her big house in Boulder, and she hoped my family would be there. The moment she said it, a quiet dread crept into my chest. After over a year of avoiding them, the thought of seeing my parents and Charles again made my throat tighten. Still, I didn't want to disappoint her, so I said yes. I told her, yes, I'll bring Paisley and Logan. But after I hung up, my mind spun with 100 different thoughts. I didn't want to upset her, but the idea of showing up at that party filled me with anxiety. After the call with Grandma, while I was still lost in thoughts, Paisley walked in from the kitchen. She saw the worried look on my face and immediately asked, "What's wrong? You don't look okay." I pulled her into a chair and told her about Grandma's invitation. After listening, Paisley looked at me with concern in her eyes and asked, "Do you want to go? I know you don't feel comfortable seeing them again." Right after she asked, I let out a deep sigh and said, "I don't want to disappoint Grandma. She's the only family member who's ever truly loved me." Paisley gently placed her hand on mine and gave it a light squeeze. She said, "Whatever you decide, I'm with you." Hearing those words from her, I felt grateful, lucky even. I want a wife who understands me and always stands by me. After nearly 2 minutes of thinking in silence, I told her, "We'll go to Grandma's party. We can't keep running from this." And more importantly, she invited us. Just as I finished speaking, Logan, sitting nearby, suddenly shouted with excitement. While building his Legos, he had been secretly listening to everything. His excitement reminded me of all the times he'd visited my grandmother with us. Even though he'd only seen her a few times, Logan adored Grandma Helen. He suggested we make a greeting card for her, and even asked Paisley if she could bake something for her, because about 3 months ago, when we visited, Grandma had loved one of Paisley's cakes. Back then, Paisley had suggested that Logan make cards for both his grandparents. But Logan refused. He said, "Grandma and Grandpa don't like me. They only care about Adrian, so I'm not making them cards." Hearing those words from my son hit me hard. I wasn't sad because he didn't love my parents. I was sad because my son never got to feel their love, all because of the shadow cast by Adrian and Charles. Adrian is the son of Charles, my younger brother. Since we were kids, Charles had always been the golden child of my parents, and when Adrian was born, he inherited the title of golden grandchild in the family. My childhood growing up with Charles was filled with unfairness. All because Charles had a smoother mouth than I did and was smarter. He always knew how to win over the adults. When I broke a glass, Mom would scold me, and I would stay silent. But when Charles broke a glass, he would immediately find Mom and say, "Dear Mom, your sweet son accidentally broke the glass." Then she would hug him and say, "It's okay." Or at dinner, whenever our parents had something new, he would instantly throw in a few compliments like, "Mom, your new hair looks beautiful." Or, "Dad, you're a hero in my heart." I couldn't say those things. He didn't just know how to charm our parents. He also knew how to impress guests who came over with fancy compliments. That's why my parents, at some point, started to favor him. I thought their favoritism would stop when we got older, married, and had children. But it didn't. My parents clearly showed the difference between Logan and Adrian. They favored Adrian way too much. When Logan was born, my parents only visited briefly. But when Adrian was born, they gave him $5,000 to help with diapers and formula. Also, my mom stayed at the hospital for several days to help Charles's wife care for Adrian. As the kids grew up, she always took pictures of Adrian and posted them on her personal Facebook, but she never mentioned Logan. During family meals when we got together, the conversation always revolved around Adrian. Then, more than a year ago, we had a big argument on my father's birthday. After the party ended that day, my parents gave Adrian a gift, a plane ticket to Hawaii to go with them. I asked Mom about Logan's share. She replied coldly, "Logan can go next time. If we ever take another trip, we'll bring him." After that, I stood up and pointed out how unfair they were. When I finished speaking, Mom didn't argue back. Instead, she said, "If you feel it's unfair, then don't ever return to this house." Since then, I've stopped bringing my wife and Logan over. Back to the story of the Christmas party at my grandmother's house. For a whole week before Christmas, Logan worked on a beautiful card to give to great-grandmother. The card was made from green paper that he had cut into the shape of a Christmas tree. On the front, he drew a little house with smoke curling out of the chimney, and next to it was an elderly lady with silver hair smiling. Logan wrote in wobbly red crayon letters at the tree's base, "I love you, great-grandma. Merry Christmas." In the top right corner, he glued a small yellow star. Every night after dinner, Logan would sit at the table and color the card. Now and then he'd ask me, "Dad, does this look good?" And when I nodded and told him yes, his face would light up like he'd just been rewarded. On Christmas morning, Logan went into the kitchen to help Paisley bake. The two of them worked and joked together. Sometimes Paisley would playfully dab some frosting on his nose, and the two would giggle. Seeing Logan grinning with his frosting-covered nose made me smile. When he noticed me smiling, he ran over and hugged my leg, leaving a spot of frosting on my jeans. Paisley looked at me apologetically, but I shook my head and gently brushed Logan's hair. Seeing the smiles on my son's and wife's faces in that warm kitchen, with the sweet smell of baked goods in the air, I hoped that that year's Christmas party would be meaningful, and I truly believed I was right to accept Grandma's invitation. At that moment, I had no idea that just a few hours later, my mother, Nancy, would give us a shock we would never forget for the rest of our lives. Around 4 p.m., our family left Denver and headed to Grandma's house in Boulder. We had planned to arrive early, before 5, but because of traffic caused by an accident, it was almost 6:30 when we arrived. On the way, Logan sat in the back seat, constantly asking, "When will we get to great-grandmother's house?" He held the card tightly, worried it might get wrinkled. Paisley sat beside me, occasionally glancing over with an anxious look, afraid we were getting there too late. When our car turned onto the familiar street leading to Grandma's house, my stomach tightened. The two-story white house with the red tile roof came into view, surrounded by large oak trees covered in twinkling Christmas lights. In front of the house, the driveway and curb were packed with cars. I recognized Charles's blue Honda Civic and my parents' silver Camry among them. There were a few other cars I didn't realize, probably from distant relatives. At that moment, my heart started beating strangely and uneasily. It had been over a year since I last came home or attended any gathering at my parents' place. Ever since the day they favored Adrian right in front of Logan. After finding a spot to park at the end of the street, we walked up to Grandma's front door and rang the bell. Paisley stood beside me holding Logan, who was still clutching the card and the box of cookies in his hands. I could hear laughter and chatter coming from inside, soft Christmas music playing, and the smell of delicious food drifting out. The door opened slightly in less than a minute, and my mother, Nancy, stood. She was wearing a red sweater with a reindeer pattern, and her hair was done up neatly, looking nothing like the simple woman I used to know. It was hard to describe how I felt at that moment. Part of me was happy to see my mom after more than a year apart, but another part was nervous about how she would react. When she saw us, her eyes moved from me to Paisley, then to Logan, who was beaming. Her expression was cold as ice, nothing like the warmth I had hoped for. Then, in the same cold tone, she said, "Go home. There's no room left." I froze after those words. My heart seemed to stop for a moment, and my head spun trying to process what had just happened. Beside me, Paisley stood frozen too, her eyes wide in disbelief. She instinctively tightened her grip on my hand. Logan was just over 6, but even he understood what my mom had said. The smile on his face slowly disappeared. His bright eyes turned confused. He looked up at me, then at Paisley, not understanding why we were being turned away. After a short silence, I tried to stay calm and said to my mother, "Grandma invited us. There's no way, there's no room." Without hesitation, my mom shot back dryly, "Helen told me if you showed up late, send you away." I stood there in shock, like someone had squeezed the air right out of my chest. She shut the door before I could say anything else, leaving my family alone. The cheerful sounds of the party inside went on, like we had never even existed. As I reached for the doorbell again, determined to find out the truth, Paisley gently stopped me. I looked at her. She shook her head, her eyes filled with sympathy, and softly said, "Let's go. I don't want Logan to see any more of this." I looked down at my son. Logan stood there, wide-eyed and confused, still holding the card and the box of cookies. In trembling, he asked, "Dad, why didn't Grandma let us in? I made this card for great-grandmother." Hearing that innocent question shattered me. I had no idea how to explain the cruelty of adults to a 6-year-old. Without wasting another second, I picked Logan up, took Paisley's hand, and walked away from Grandma's house. When we got to the car and I opened the door for Logan, he burst into tears. Tears streamed down his cheeks as he sobbed, "Dad, I just wanted to give great-grandmother the card." My heart broke into pieces watching him cry. I held him close, feeling completely powerless. Paisley sat beside me, her eyes red, fighting back her tears. That was the moment I made a promise to myself. For the rest of my life, I would never let my son see my mother, Nancy, again. After leaving Grandma's house, I drove to a nearby Denny's for dinner. On the way there, Logan kept quietly sobbing and would occasionally ask, "Dad, is great-grandmother mad at me?" Every question from him felt like a knife to my heart. Paisley had to calm him down by discussing the tasty food he could eat at Denny's. She said, "Do you want pancakes with maple syrup? Or maybe some crispy fried chicken? They even have cotton candy." Logan immediately perked up. His eyes lit up when he heard about the cotton candy. He clapped his hands and said, "I want pancakes and cotton candy." I smiled at how easily he bounced back. That's the thing about kids. One second they're crying their eyes out, and the next, they're laughing again like nothing ever happened. Looking at Logan in the rearview mirror, I saw he had stopped crying. Now he was just full of questions about food. Paisley glanced over at me, her eyes still worried, but there was relief there too. Seeing our son happy again brought her some comfort. When we pulled into the parking lot at Denny's, I looked at the card and the box of cookies still lying on the back seat. I felt a lingering regret and doubt about what had just happened. Knowing how strict my grandmother can be, it wouldn't be out of character for her to refuse someone entry just for being late. But the fact that it was my mother who delivered the message, that's what made me doubt everything. My phone suddenly rang as we were about to walk into Denny's. When I looked at the screen and saw the name Grandma Helen, I hesitated momentarily, then let it go to silence. I didn't want to talk to anyone right then, especially after what happened. When the phone rang again, Paisley looked at me and said gently, "You should pick up. Maybe something's wrong." Listening to her, I answered the call. Grandma's voice came through the speaker, filled with concern. "Marcus, is everything okay? Why haven't you all arrived yet?" Her question caught me entirely off guard. I quickly asked, "Didn't you tell my mom to send us away because we were late?" There was a brief pause. Then Grandma replied, clearly surprised, "I never said that." My mind exploded. So my mom had lied. Grandma had never told her to send us away. A wave of anger mixed with hurt washed over me. I couldn't believe my mother could be that cruel, not only turning us away, but also blaming Grandma to cover it up. After a moment of silence, Grandma spoke again, her tone stern. "Come back. I'll get to the bottom of this." I let out a slow breath and answered, "I don't think making a big deal out of this is necessary. I'll stop by to see you another time." Suddenly, Grandma shouted, something I had never heard from her before. "Come back right now." I was stunned. I had never heard her so upset, so commanding. Grandma Helen, the gentle woman who had always spoken to me in a soft, loving tone, was now speaking with such firmness and anger. Her voice left me speechless. 30 seconds of silence passed. Then her voice came through again, calmer but still resolute. "I'm sorry for raising my voice. Please bring your family back. I'll be waiting." Her sincere apology broke something inside me. Grandma had always been the one person in the family who understood and truly loved me. If she was asking, I couldn't say no. In a quiet voice, I said, "We'll come back right away." Paisley, who had heard the whole conversation, looked at me with understanding. She nodded and said, "Let's go back." Standing in front of the restaurant, Logan didn't know what was happening. When he saw us heading back to the car, he asked, "Mom, Dad, aren't we eating here anymore?" I gently brushed his hair and said, "We're going to see Grandma Helen now." The moment I said that, Logan jumped with excitement. "Dad? Then let's go, hurry." Right after that, we got in the car and drove as fast as we could, heading back to Grandma's house. 10 minutes later, we were again standing in front of Grandma's house. This time, she was already outside waiting for us. Standing beside her were some distant aunts, uncles, my parents, and Charles and his family. The scene before me was surprising. Everyone was standing out on the porch in the cold Christmas night air. Their breath turned into little clouds in the freezing temperature. Grandma stood in the center with a stern expression, while my parents stood off to the side, clearly annoyed. As soon as we got out of the car, Charles, my younger brother, snapped with irritation. "Because of your family, Grandma and all of us had to wait out here in the cold." Before I could even respond, Grandma Helen shouted in a voice I had never heard from her before, "Shut up!" Her voice echoed through the still night air. Charles froze, stunned into silence. He didn't say another word. The other relatives stayed quiet too. No one dared to speak. Then Grandma walked over to us. Her expression softened. She hugged Paisley and me, then leaned down and gently took Logan's hand. In a soft voice, she said to him, "Great-grandmother has been waiting a long time for you." Seeing her kindness, Logan smiled, still holding the card tightly. As we stepped inside the house, I walked past my mother. I glanced over and saw her face pale, her eyes avoiding mine. Paisley, walking beside me, sensed the tension too. She squeezed my hand firmly, as if to give me strength. Once we stepped into the living room, I saw it had been beautifully decorated for Christmas. A tall tree stood in the corner, covered in shimmering ornaments and twinkling lights. The table was filled with delicious food waiting to be served, and the fireplace crackled warmly, giving the room a cozy glow. Everything was perfect for a Christmas gathering, except for the suffocating tension in the air. Grandma stood in the center of the room, her face more serious than I had ever seen. In a clear and resolute voice, she said, "Before we continue with this celebration, some things need to be addressed." The room fell into complete silence. No one dared to cough or even shift. Relatives stood along the walls. Charles and his wife stood by Adrian, and my parents hovered near the back, looking like they were trying to disappear. Suddenly, Grandma turned to my mother and roared with unmistakable authority, "Nancy, is there anything you'd like to say to me? Or to Marcus and his family?" All eyes in the room turned to my mother. She said nothing, just stood there, pale as a sheet, hands trembling, unable to meet anyone's gaze. When she didn't speak, Grandma continued, her tone firmer now. "This is my house, not yours. Who gave you the right to send Marcus and his family away?" That question hit like a slap. My mother stammered, trying to defend herself. I didn't. Marcus is lying. I didn't send anyone away." Hearing her still deny it, trying to pin the blame on me, Grandma cut in with a voice that could freeze water. "Enough." Then she turned to Uncle Bruce, a longtime neighbor who often helped her fix things around the house. She called out, "Bruce, pull up the footage from the front door." Uncle Bruce took the tablet from Grandma's hands without hesitation. He was good with tech and often helped her set up and use electronic devices. He opened the security camera app with quick, practiced fingers and found the footage from when we arrived. The room was so quiet, you could hear the ticking of the wall clock. Logan stood beside me, still clutching his card, confused by everything. Paisley held my hand tightly, both of us tense as we waited. A few seconds later, the familiar voice played from the tablet speaker, loud and clear, "Go home." "There's no room left." My parents froze. Their faces turned pale. Their eyes stared at the tablet like it was some monster. Then the second sentence came, even colder and more cutting. "Helen told me if you showed up late, I had to send you away." The voice was unmistakably my mother's. Flat, emotionless, and cruel. I looked around. The expressions on my parents' faces and Charles's family were like those of people who had just been caught in the act. Charles kept his head down, unable to look anyone in the eye. His wife held Adrian tightly, shielding him from what was unfolding. My father, Dennis, stood frozen, face drained of all color, and my mother was trembling so hard it looked like she might collapse. Whispers began to spread across the room. Relatives started murmuring to each other, their eyes casting judgmental glances toward my parents. No one could believe that Nancy, the woman they had always thought was kind, could be so cruel to her grandson. When the entire room had heard everything, Uncle Bruce shut off the video and set the tablet down. His face, too, showed quiet anger over what had just been revealed. The air around me felt thick with tension, almost hard to breathe. But inside, I felt something I hadn't felt all evening, relief. I felt a quiet sense of satisfaction, because finally the truth had come out. A short while later, the room began to stir with noise. The guests started speaking up, openly criticizing my mother. Janet, my dad's cousin, shook her head and said, "Nancy, I never thought you could do something like this." From the corner of the room, Uncle Mike, another cousin of my dad's, added, "This is too much. Christmas is about family being together. No one with a heart would kick their son and grandson out of a celebration. Even animals have more compassion than you, Nancy." The voices of disapproval spread quickly. Whispers turned into loud remarks. My mother stood there, completely isolated. Not a single person spoke in her defense. 2 minutes later, Grandma raised her hand, and instantly, the room fell silent. Her authority in the family was absolute. When she made a gesture, no one dared to disobey. Then, in a voice as cold as ice, she declared, "From this moment forward, I no longer have a son named Dennis, and I have no daughter-in-law named Nancy." The words struck the room like a bolt of lightning. My father, Dennis, cried out in a desperate voice, "Mom, you can't do this." My mother broke down in tears, sobbing as she pleaded, "I know I was wrong. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have done it." But Grandma had made up her mind. Her face was hard as stone, unmoved and resolute. She had endured the injustice in our family for far too long. Before they could speak again, she spoke loud and clear, her tone full of finality. "You have 30 days to leave the house you're living in. The estate in Highlands Ranch will be passed on to Marcus and his family. Tomorrow morning, I'll begin transferring ownership, and a formal eviction notice will be issued." They stood there in shock. The house my parents were living in was legally Grandma's, and the Highlands Ranch estate, one of her most valuable properties, was now being handed over to us. My father stammered, voice trembling, "You can't do this. I'm your son." Grandma looked him dead in the eye and said, her voice heavy with disappointment, "You stopped being my son when you favored Charles over Marcus. Now leave." Her words landed with finality. Dennis and Nancy stood frozen, like statues, unable to accept what had just happened. Moments later, they turned and quietly walked out, heads down, unable to meet anyone's gaze. After my parents left, Charles, my younger brother, stayed behind. He looked at Grandma, his voice tense with worry, and asked, "What about me? I'm your grandson, too." His question caught everyone off guard. Grandma turned to him, her eyes cold and expression unreadable. She answered plainly, "You won't have a share. You saw your parents mistreat Marcus and said nothing. You even took pride in it. Don't think I didn't notice." Charles tried to defend himself. "But Grandma, I didn't get involved in what Mom and Dad did. I just..." Grandma raised her hand, cutting him off before he could finish. Then she said, "You stayed silent in the face of injustice and benefited from it. That makes you complicit." Hearing this, Charles's face turned red with frustration. He grabbed his wife's hand and reached for Adrian, speaking through clenched teeth, "Fine. If that's how it is, we're leaving." Before walking out, Charles turned and looked straight at me, his eyes filled with bitterness. He shouted, "Are you happy now, Marcus? You've torn this whole family apart." I stood silently. I didn't respond. Deep down, I didn't feel proud or victorious. I only felt a deep, quiet sadness for everything lost. Charles stormed out, pulling his wife and son with him. Adrian, once the favored grandson, now looked like a confused child, completely lost in a situation he didn't understand. As the door closed again, the room fell silent. The remaining relatives looked at me with eyes full of sympathy, as if they had just witnessed the end of an era. At that moment, I saw what lay ahead, the fallout and the consequences of Grandma's decision. After they left, Grandma asked for the party to continue. She clapped her hands softly and said to everyone, "Let's enjoy this Christmas night. This is a time for real families to be together." The atmosphere in the room gradually returned to normal. The remaining relatives did their best to put aside what had just happened and focus on the celebration. Laughter and chatter slowly returned, though still a little stiff at first. As for Logan, he had been waiting for this moment all week. He ran over to great-grandmother with the card in his hands. Shyly, he held it up and said, "Great-grandmother, this is the Christmas gift I made for you." Grandma immediately took the card, her eyes lighting up as she looked at the childlike drawings. She hugged Logan tightly and said in a warm voice, "Thank you, sweetheart. I will frame this card and hang it on the living room wall for everyone to see." Logan grinned from ear to ear, overjoyed that his gift was appreciated. Later, my wife brought out the cookies she had made that morning for everyone to enjoy. The chocolate chip cookies were carefully decorated with colorful candy pieces. Our relatives and neighbors couldn't stop complimenting them. Janet said, "Paisley, these cookies are amazing. Can you share the recipe?" Uncle Bruce nodded. "Yes, they remind me of my childhood." Grandma helped slice and serve the cookies, her face brighter than it had been in a long time. It was as if a heavy burden had finally been lifted from her shoulders. Watching everyone enjoy themselves, I quietly gave thanks for what Grandma had done for our family. That night, since it was getting late and snow had begun to fall, we stayed overnight at Grandma's house. Logan slept with great-grandmother, while Paisley and I stayed in the living room. I slept more soundly than I had in years, as if I had finally been freed from a nightmare that had lasted far too long. I thought Grandma had spoken out of anger when she disowned my father and cut him off from his inheritance. But she wasn't joking. At 8 a.m. the next morning, after we had breakfast, toast and sunny-side-up eggs that she made herself, Grandma called her lawyer, Christian, to come to the house. He had been her attorney for years, a well-dressed man in his 60s with silver hair and a calm, professional presence. When Mr. Christian arrived, Grandma sat at the dining table to review the legal procedures. Paisley and I sat nearby while Logan played with the toys Grandma had laid out for him. Grandma authorized the lawyer to begin the process of transferring ownership of two properties. The two-story house in Lakewood where my parents had been living, a house she had bought for them 10 years ago, and the estate in Highlands Ranch, which she now intended to pass on to me and my wife. Together, those two properties were worth close to $2 million. As she gave her instructions, Mr. Christian carefully noted every detail for the legal paperwork. She also asked him to send an official notice demanding that my parents vacate the Lakewood house within 30 days. Mr. Christian nodded and replied, "I'll prepare everything and send the formal documents later today." In that moment, I felt deeply grateful to Grandma, not because of the money or the property, but because of the fairness and justice she had brought to our family. After the lawyer left, I stood up, hugged her tightly, and said with emotion in my voice, "Thank you, Grandma. I don't know what else to say." She gently patted my back and smiled. "I'm just doing what's right." Before we headed back to our home, she hugged Logan tightly and said to us, "Next time you visit, make sure to bake more cookies for me to give to the neighbors." They loved Paisley's cookies. Her simple request made both Paisley and me laugh. I told her, "If you want, we can bake cookies daily and bring them to you." As our car pulled away from her house, I looked back in the rearview mirror and saw her waving goodbye on the porch. And at that moment, I knew for sure our lives had entered a new chapter. I thought my parents would quietly walk away after what happened at Grandma's house, but they didn't. Instead of facing the consequences of their actions, they fought back recklessly. When they received the eviction notice from Christian, Grandma's attorney, they arrived at her house demanding answers. Maybe they thought they could convince her to reverse her decision, or at least make her feel guilty. After they left, Grandma called me. Her voice sounded tired. She said, "Marcus, I need to let you know. Your parents came by and caused a scene. You should be careful. They might show up at your house too." Through her account, I learned more about what happened. My father had shouted, demanding that she take everything back. My mother cried, saying Grandma was tearing the family apart. But Grandma stood firm. Ultimately, she threatened to call the police before they finally left. And just as she warned, that very afternoon, as I got home from work, my parents and Charles's family were standing in front of my house in Thornton. I had just pulled into the garage when I saw their faces full of anger at my front door. As I stepped outside, Charles came forward, his face red with rage. He pointed at me and said bitterly, "You'll choke on that mansion, Marcus." My mother stood beside him, her eyes red from crying, but her voice was filled with hatred. "I regret ever giving birth to you." That sentence, coming from my mother, left me stunned. I stood frozen for a moment, but I held my ground. I refused to let emotions take control. Seconds later, my father stepped up, his voice low and threatening. "If you still want us to consider you family, you'd better give up some of what Grandma gave you." They shouted and cursed at me for nearly 2 minutes. Neighbors began peeking through their windows, curious about the commotion. Instead of arguing or trying to reason with them, I calmly pulled out my phone and dialed 911. When the line connected, I said clearly, "Hi, there are individuals outside my home threatening me." Hearing that, my father yelled, "You're calling the cops on your father?" I looked him straight in the eyes and answered coldly, "Are you confused? I don't know who you are." That sentence hit him like a slap. He stood there speechless, face flushed with rage. Even Charles looked shocked. He hadn't expected me to stand up like that. A moment later, Charles's wife tugged on his arm and said, "Let's go. The police will be here any minute." Not wanting to get arrested for harassment, they reluctantly left. My parents got into their car, faces filled with hatred. Charles gave me one last look, full of resentment, before they drove away. 15 minutes later, 2 officers arrived. I invited them inside and explained everything from beginning to end. I also showed them the footage from our security camera, which clearly showed the threats. Officer Johnson, an experienced, middle-aged man, took detailed notes. He asked, "Would you like to file an official report?" Without hesitation, I nodded and told him, "Yes, I want this documented so I can apply for a restraining order. I'm worried they'll keep harassing my family." Just 1 week later, my parents and Charles's family received a formal notice from the court. They were legally prohibited from approaching my family for the next 3 years. No visits, phone calls, emails, no contact in any form. When I received my copy of the court order, I felt a wave of relief. Finally, my little family was protected from the very people who had caused us so much pain. Precisely 30 days after receiving the notice from Christian, my parents moved out of the house. That afternoon, I drove over to check on the place and found it empty. They had left behind some old furniture and stains on the walls, but at least they had complied with the court order. We didn't move in. The house in Lakewood, while beautiful, held too many painful memories of the old family. Instead, I hired contractors to renovate it completely, fresh paint, new carpet, repairs throughout. Once the work was done, I rented it out to a family of 6 for $2,000 a month. As for the estate in Highlands Ranch that Grandma had given us, we didn't move in there either. Paisley and I agreed we would stay in the home we bought together in Thornton, the one we built from the ground up, filled with memories and meaning. That was our real home. The estate had deteriorated over the years due to a lack of proper upkeep. I invested around $150,000 into fully restoring it, upgrading the plumbing and electrical systems, installing hardwood floors, modernizing the kitchen, and landscaping the garden. After renovating, I returned it to premium property management to maintain and lease. Depending on the rental agreement, I now earn between $6,000 and $10,000 a month from it. But I didn't spend that money recklessly or use it for unnecessary luxuries. During the first month, we visited Grandma, and I tried to hand her all the rental income. She shook her head and gently refused. She said, "Keep it. That's the return on something I chose to give you. Use it to invest in Logan's future." Her words touched me deeply. I nodded and agreed. I opened a separate savings account for Logan and deposited most of the rental income. After everything we'd been through, I felt incredibly fortunate to have Grandma in my life. Not just because she gave us these properties, but because she taught me the actual value of fairness and genuine love. More than a year has passed since that fateful Christmas night. Life has changed in ways I never could have imagined. My parents are now living in another city, Phoenix, Arizona, surviving on their retirement benefits. Gone are the big house and all the comforts Grandma had provided them for many years. From what I've heard through distant relatives, They rent a small apartment and live modestly on their monthly social security checks. Charles hasn't spoken to me since that day. He and his family moved to Texas to start over. Adrian, once the golden grandson, is now just a distant memory from the past. At first, I felt slightly sad when thinking about the family that had fallen apart. Childhood memories, even the ones shaped by favoritism, were still part of me. But eventually, I came to realize that my life now should revolve only around my wife, my son Logan, and my grandmother. We visit Grandma regularly on weekends. She's now 80, her hair whiter, her steps slower, but her mind is still sharp and her spirit joyful. Logan always gets excited to see his great-grandmother, and she dotes on him endlessly. I hope she'll be with us for many more years so that Logan can treasure even more memories with this incredible woman. These days, life feels joyful every single day, especially now that we're about to welcome a new little angel. Paisley is 8 months pregnant, her belly round and beautiful, and Logan never stops talking to the baby inside. He often says, "Hey baby, I'll teach you how to play Legos and how to draw." At night, I feel fortunate when the three of us are curled up on the sofa watching a movie. Paisley resting her head on my shoulder, Logan asleep in my lap. This is the happiness I've been searching for all these years. Today, I share this story not to brag about what I have now, but in hopes that anyone who's ever gone through what I did, being mistreated, overlooked, or hurt by their own family, knows that they are not alone. And more importantly, they have the right to protect themselves. Never accept injustice just because it comes from family. Your children deserve to be loved equally. Set boundaries if you've tried to speak up and no one listened. Sometimes distancing yourself from toxic people, even if they're related by blood, is how you protect your own home. You don't owe anyone the right to hurt you just because they share your DNA. And just one day ago, I got a call from a distant relative. My parents are now living near him in Phoenix. He called to scold me. He said I was the reason our family fell apart. Do you think I'm the reason my family broke apart? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. I genuinely want your perspective. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Take care, and see you in the following story.